Barnett.
Tim Barnett, that's right. Sorry.
You got it. No, it's all
You
good.
can pick that up if you want.
You want me to like, hold it like this?
Yeah, no, you can take it out because you've got the long cord.
Oh,
so you
yeah,
can,
yeah.
You can even be like really animated with your gestures
Sweet.
and stuff.
And this isn't just a prop. This is a real deal.
Yeah, let me just do this real quick.
Okay.
Load
Nice.
everything up.
Am I on there? Oh yeah, I'm on there.
Yeah, I think you're on there.
Yeah. Do I need to
Alright.
just scoot it forward a little bit? There we go.
This is Shannon Poe again at the Maven Truth Conference, and I'm sitting here talking to Tim Barnett with, he is a resident, or not a resident speaker, maybe a resident speaker with Stand to Reason, or
Oh, yeah.
you still live in Canada?
I
do you live in
well,
California
I
now?
live in Toronto,
Okay.
and but if you were to go like to the website or whatever,
You're on the
it would
website,
say
yeah.
speaker apologist with Stand to Reason.
Yeah.
So I guess because the nature of the job, I can, as long as I'm near an airport,
Yeah,
you
sure.
know, I can.
Yeah.
So it worked out. I could live in Toronto,
Live in Toronto.
reach the Canadian people. They're almost an unreached people group, and
Yeah, they're kind of like isolated, right? Like
Sure.
some small island in the.
sure,
Right.
And they're the influence of secularism and
Yeah,
And
now,
all-
I say that pejoratively, but I mean you're.
Oh,
'cause,
sure.
I mean, I'm from Alabama. I don't
Okay.
actually know.
yeah, it is.
I know the stereotype, but
sure.
sometimes stereotypes are wrong, right?
Sure, and it's it would be similar to the European culture is much more down that slope to secularism. Canada's right behind them, and you guys are unfortunately kind of catching up.
I know we are. Even here in the Bible Belt,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are losing our identity in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The things that kind of have been classically Southern and associated with Southern culture and Christian culture in the South, and it's going the way of the dodo bird.
Yeah.
And, sometimes that can be good because it kind of the people that are really serious about this stuff kind of
Sure,
get
it
after it,
definitely.
but
Yeah, it
you do still
separates-
hate to see. It's like seeing Mordor get into the Shire, or
Yeah.
seeing what's the bad wizard's name? Whenever he got into the Shire and he started messing with
It
things.
wasn't good.
Yeah, it was bad. There was a loss there, and
Sure.
never really
Well,
recovered.
you know what? It's funny you mentioned this because I was listening to an audiobook by James Emery White. It's called Meet Gen Z, Meet Generation Z.
Yeah, I've heard White.
Yeah, and he talks about the influence of secularism, and he talks about the rise of the nuns.
Yeah.
NONES. Those who don't affiliate themselves with any religious or organization. They're non-religious, and he says, so you have this attack from the world, secularism, this kind of thing, and you have a lot of these Christians who kind of are in the mushy middle. They end up going over to at one time they would have said, "Hey, I live in the Bible Belt. I'm Christian."
Yeah,
and
sure.
that was the culturally in thing to do. But now, because the culture has shifted to secularism, those same people, because the culture, it's in to be it's in to be secular.
Yeah.
They're willing to say, "No, I'm not a Christian." They don't affiliate with that.
Yeah.
So,
Or maybe they'll say, depending on the way that the question's asked. I mean, like, I know for myself, like, are you a religious person? Well, I kind of shrink back at that
Sure.
a little
Yeah.
bit, but
No,
I mean,
you're right.
technically, yes, I am a very religious
Yeah.
person. Are you a Baptist? Well, I go to a Baptist church, but that's not what I am first and foremost.
Yeah.
So it's like,
you're right. You're right.
it's not saying that those people aren't secular or more secular
Yeah.
than they would have been 20 years ago, but
It's uncool today to say
is.
you're religious. People prefer the term spiritual or something like that. I like to say I'm a follower of Christ, and kind of put myself next to Jesus Christ. He still has a lot of credibility, even in a secular culture.
It's true.
A lot of people think, hey, he's minimally a good moral teacher or something like that.
Yeah.
And so if I can align myself with him, I think that's probably the right stance to take with the culture.
I think so. Certainly is a good way to kind of open the door up with people, especially like we were talking about earlier with in the South, there was a time when you could talk about being born again or whatever.
Yeah.
But, those kind of days are slipping past us. But I imagine that you being from Canada, I mean, you've got to kind of set the tone initially with people and do a lot more explaining than I guess I would, talking to somebody, because if I say, I'm a Christian, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, you're one of those guys.
They know what. Sure.
Some people, it's like, you're a what?
Yeah, no.
Right?
And that's exactly it. In Canada, to call yourself a Christian is to also wear all kind of other labels. Like, I'm also intolerant, and I'm a bigot, and I'm, you have all these. There's a lot of baggage that goes along with being a Christian.
Yeah, sure.
There's this stereotype. There's how the media paints a Christian, and a lot of people have bought into that.
Yeah, that's frustrating to me, because a lot of Christians have bought into that, and so you have this group of Christians who are making an argument against this other type of Christian that is largely non-existent.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure that there are people who are bigoted,
but they're few and far between.
Yeah. It's very frustrating, but you do have this kind of people have taken that, swallowed that, even within the Christian culture, and you have this kind of weird dynamic now, even within Christianity.
Yeah,
this strange divisiveness that's not necessarily bound on theological terms, but it's very much a cultural divide.
That's true.
But anyway, so how did you become a Christian? And then how did you get hooked up with SCR?
Well,
Stand to reason.
I was raised in a Christian home. We went to church whenever the doors were open, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
My parents were very involved. So
large congregation that you grew up in?
No, actually, it was a very small country church, like 80 people, and half of them were related to me. There was a lot of. My mom's from a big Christian family. She has 3 brothers and 2 sisters. So so lots of cousins, this kind of thing. And so the youth group, was with my cousins, and I have 3 siblings, and so we made up half the youth group.
Yeah.
Now I didn't know much about. I wasn't paying attention. If you asked me any kind of question about Christianity, I wouldn't have been able to answer you. I went because that was what we did. Yeah. It was our tradition. And I was proud of that tradition, to the point where when I was in high school and kind of drifting away or I don't know how you want to put it, but I started getting into the party scene, and I would I would party until 2 a.m. I would still scrape myself out of bed for church. And it was like, it didn't make sense. I was living this kind of double life.
Yeah.
And of course, if there was any faith there, it was stale and dry, and or maybe there wasn't any genuine faith there. I have questions about that myself.
I can relate. I remember growing up in church, growing up in a good Christian family, but in high school, I began to drift away, and I started to kind of experiment with a lot of things. But I remember, like, if I was at a party late at night, or if I was inebriated, out of my mind in some way, form, or fashion, I would see a mirror, and I'd have to look at myself in the face, and I would be like, it was like God was staring back at me and being like, you shouldn't be here doing what you're doing.
So it's funny,
and I would be like, I'll deal with it tomorrow.
I mean, it's crazy how you just gave that illustration, because I was just going to say the same thing. I would be at parties, and it's those times where you're drinking too much, so you have to use the washroom a lot. So you call them washrooms, restroom. So you go to the restroom, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and there's this conviction, totally. And it's, Tim, what are you doing here? Yeah. Really? And then, of course, and you're going to get up for church tomorrow, and so there was this double life I was living for a long time, and I went to university. It wasn't like I chose one or the other. I just kept going to church. We kept partying. Went to university, and I was studying physics. Actually, originally engineering. I switched to physics, and there was so much work to do, and I wanted straight A's. So I'm working really hard. And like serious nerd, I am in the library. I'm going on Saturdays into the library, spend all day there. I had no time for parties.
Yeah.
Some people go to university and that's when they start partying. I don't know where you'd find the time. I was focused. Like, no, I didn't have time for girls. I didn't have time for any of that.
Good for you.
So it got me away from that scene, which is interesting. But there was still no life. There was still no life in here. And then I got asked a question. I had friends who were atheists. I went to a public secular university, and there were atheists. There was a Jewish girl. There was a couple Muslims. There was a guy who, he would call himself a Christian. So there's all these people I'm hanging out with, and they one day we're talking about religion, and they say, "Tim, why are you a Christian?" And I'm not joking. My response, my knee-jerk response was, "Well, I'm a Christian because my parents are." And I knew, okay, here I am with all these brilliant people. And, some of them are studying physics, some were like pure mathematics. And these are just really brilliant students. And I felt so embarrassed. How could I? I mean, it was already off my tongue. And it's like, how do I get those words back? But I didn't have anything to fill it up with. I didn't have to replace it with. Yeah. It was, I'm a Christian. Okay, no. And it was all these false starts. And so I went home just completely embarrassed, and I started looking into this Christianity thing. Why would anyone be a Christian? Why are my parents Christians? I'm asking them. They don't really know. Yeah. It's something that my mom was raised in, and my dad wasn't, but my dad liked my mom, and so and of course they believed it was true, but it was like, can you give me any reasons? And my dad would talk about, well, these guys have come to our church, these speakers, and they would come and give evidence. Now, he couldn't recite it, but he remembered these times where guys would come. Now, later on, I found out those guys are apologists. Never, I was in my 20s, early 20s. I'd never heard of an apologist before. I didn't know who, guys like Ravi Zacharias and William Lane Craig. And, you go down the list of these Josh McDowell, these famous apologists.
It's funny. I was thinking about Josh McDowell. I remember in junior high school, I was in a Sunday school class. This is before I went into my foray into all of these other kind of different, living a life with a lot of licenses. And I remember that particular Sunday school teacher had Josh McDowell's book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and it looked like a dictionary to me. It just looked like, oh my gosh! But I got enough to know there's something more than me just believing that this is true. And I remember, for whatever reason, whenever I was really challenged in my kind of quasi-Christian mentality in college by professors and other people, I remember thinking, oh, those are good questions, or those are good objections. Yeah. But I know that there's something about Christianity that gives me I wouldn't have said warrant. Sure. But it's there's a lot of parallels here. I like this.
Sure. And
I knew there was a reason why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah, well, you know what? And this is something, one of the goals, when I give a talk, I just gave a talk on design in the universe, the teleological argument. Yeah. And I think it's one of the most powerful arguments for God's existence. Now, I just lay on the evidence one after another. And some people have, come to me afterwards and say, Tim, why not just give, one or two pieces of evidence? Why do you just keep layering it on? And what I want people to leave with, not necessarily memorizing everything I just said, but I want them leaving with the overwhelmed sensation that, you know what, I may not know all the reasons, but there's a lot of evidence here. Yeah. It's not just one or two things. There are a number of these fine-tuned conditions that make possible the existence of life, and they all must be just so. And so you got a book like Josh McDowell's Evidence of It. You may not, I don't know everything that's in that book. Yeah. There's a lot of content in that book.
They came out with the second edition and added a couple of chapters.
They've updated it and everything, and Sean has done that, and that's great. And we need those as a resource, but it's it's there. So when someone says Christianity, there's no evidence for it. Are you kidding me? I want people to be able to say, no, I actually went to this talk, or actually I read a book by this guy, Josh. Yeah. I can't recite everything, but you need to check it out. To make a statement like there's no evidence for God or there's no evidence for Christianity, that blanket statement is absolutely false. Now,
Yeah.
you may not agree with the conclusion, but don't give me this, there's no evidence, because I can think of, and start going through the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm confounded when people tell me that they have serious doubts that maybe Jesus didn't even exist. And I'm like, you know that, I mean, even the most secular of scholars, historical scholars, like they see Jesus as a real historical person.
Bart Ehrman wrote a book.
Maybe not the Son of God, but he was Jesus of Nazareth, was a real guy.
If that's where your skeptical filter's at, then Bart Ehrman, he says,
he got flack for that book too.
Sure, and
from not from the Christian community, but from
his own guys.
His own followers, right?
Yeah. And John Dominic Crossan, he says that Jesus existed is as sure as anything historically can ever be, and so if you want to take anything from history seriously, you should believe that Jesus existed minimally.
Yeah. Which is a good place to start.
Yeah, sure.
Just looking at the life of Jesus and understanding who he was and the mission that he felt like he had, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot to springboard off of there.
Yeah, and this is one of the pillars. Josh McDowell's famous for that Lord, well, it goes back to C.S. Lewis too.
Yeah.
Lord, liar, lunatic trilemma. Mm-hmm. Well, there was a fourth thrown in there, and that was legend, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
and so you can get rid of, you can get rid of Christ altogether if he's a legend. Of course, that doesn't work. And so you're left with those three options.
Yeah, that was really kind of like a 19th century German higher criticism.
Yeah.
Teaching or part of their theology, and it kind of grew and like with Schleiermacher, I think.
There was, I think you're right about that.
But even among secular theologians, those kind of things are like, there's more than just this kind of legendary aspect to the person of Jesus.
Yeah.
Not only that, but his disciples.
Yeah.
This and it all. Yeah. Anyway, going back to you, so you have your emphasis with STR then is like cosmological and
science and faith issues. I speak a lot on that. I would say, I got a bunch of talks. I don't know if I could say that I have an emphasis necessarily. I love talking about things like the reliability of the Gospels, the reliability of the Bible, the existence of God, and so there's a couple different ways. But probably the thing I get invited to churches to speak on the most is science and faith. It is a question that a lot of young people have. There was a study done in 2015 by 12 by Barna, and they looked at the research, a 5-year research study about why young people walk away from the faith, and they came up with 6 main reasons. And I actually think I wrote an article about this. I think all 6 reasons relate to apologetics in some respect. Some of them are a little bit more of a stretch. But there was isolationism. We're isolated and not. That's the other reason we talk about stop isolating. Let's start inoculating. Okay.
Yeah.
So they said the church is too isolated. They said one of the things was doubt. The church is not answering our questions. Of course, that's an apologetic.
Yeah, no doubt.
But another one was science and faith. They think the world and a lot of young Christians think that science and faith are incompatible.
Diametrically opposed.
That's right. And so you either have to be a person of faith or you can be a person of science. You can't do both. And what kills me is that when you look at the origin of modern science, it was started by men like Sir Isaac Newton, who spent more time writing on theology than he did on science.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's nice whenever you get kind of a historical grasp on some of those aspects, and which kind of relates to apologetics. I mean, I know I really love history because it's kind of easy to wrap my head around, and it kind of relates to a lot of different things. But that I remember once I understood that basic concept that it was Judeo-Christian ideas that said God exists and God is in an order, creates things in an orderly fashion. Therefore, we can understand the world in an orderly way.
Yeah.
So therefore, we can look at the world and we can test the world and we can find objective truth through the testing of those things, which is not an Eastern kind of. You're not going to find those kind of answers in Eastern philosophy and or theology. So, how long have you been with STR?
I think I'm terrible with dates and year. Everything just seems like that was yesterday, or that was a really long time. We're going on 4 years in May.
Oh wow!
I think. So that's
when did I met you at the Rethink conference in Briarwood in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And was that 3 years ago? Seems like you had not been with STR
I
very long
would have
at that
just
point in
started
time.
with them. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You know what? Rethink is actually where it was kind of like a job interview for me. So I started as did my degree in physics, went to teachers college, got the training for that. And then I started teaching full time. So I was starting the Christian school system, which was, I think God kind of opened a door there. And I had no plans of teaching a Christian school system. I went through the public system. I'd never been to a Christian school ever. And I actually was giving a talk at a camp and mentioned that I was looking for a job as a joke. And a lady in the audience sent me an email, said, go for an interview. We need a physics person in Toronto at one of the Christian schools. And ended up going for the interview, and they hired me. And actually, it was at that school that God opened the world of apologetics to me. The Bible teacher, who became a very good friend, and he actually just passed away this year. 39 years old, a brain tumor. But he was like a mentor to me. He was, he was actually was family friends with Ravi Zacharias.
Oh yeah, okay.
And had a philosophy degree. And he's like, Tim, here, read Tim Keller, read William Lane Craig, read Ravi Zacharias.
Yeah.
I kind of came in through apologetics initially through the creation evolution stuff, because in university, that was a lot of the questions were science questions. So I was going to a lot of the old Earth, young Earth websites and I hadn't broadened my apologetic approach.
Yeah. It was one of the first things that I got pressed on really hard whenever I came back to the Lord.
It's a huge issue.
You believe that the Earth is only 7,000 years old,
it comes
whatever.
up every time I speak on science. The first and second questions, and it depends on the order, but one of them's going to be, what about the age of the Earth?
Yeah.
And the second one will be, what about dinosaurs? I mean, they always come up. Doesn't matter if those are. I'm usually talking about the origin of the universe or the fine tuning, but somehow, because these are genuine questions people have. So I went there, and of course, that was very important to my own spiritual development and training, and then I left there to work in the public system. And what I was going to do was work in the public system, but also do my master's degree in philosophy at the same time.
Oh,
and
nice. That's
yeah, and so
serious. Right
I ended
there.
up doing that, and I wanted to be a full-time speaker. And my wife said, "Go for it." Now that wasn't initially. She was like, "Tim, you're going to be a teacher," and then it was probably my second year teaching. She's like, "You know what? You don't want to have any regrets, And so if you want to be an apologist, what do we need to do?" And so I said, well, I should probably get a philosophy degree. And, so we applied for all this stuff. And anyways, she was all in and I was all in. And one of the events I did was just a local event in Toronto. I got myself invited. So if anyone's listening to this and they're thinking, how do I get started? I'll tell you how I did it. I started calling churches, emailing churches, and most of them said no because they don't know who I am.
Sure.
But it's like, here's what I talk on. And if you want to get to know me, go for, I'm not a weirdo. I want to, and here's what I do. And here's some sample videos and stuff. So this teachers convention was happening, Christian school teachers convention. And my old principal vouched for me. And so they said, they got me 2 breakout sessions at this teachers convention.
Okay.
Sean McDowell is the keynote speaker. Now,
At a teacher's convention.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, because he used to be, well.
Was it a Christian?
It was a Christian school
Okay,
teachers
all right,
convention.
okay, I
Now,
gotcha.
actually, the first year I
How
got
many
invited.
people were there?
Not many.
Not many.
So the first year, I did my 2 sessions, and actually, so Sean came the next year. I got invited back. This is the other thing. I did these 2 sessions at this teachers convention, and I taught on these are the 2 titles: what every student needs to know about science and faith, and what every student needs to know about truth. I only had really 2 main talks. Okay, I had another evolution creation talk, but there was these 2 talks that I made, and people were sitting. The classrooms hold 30 people. It's a normal classroom.
Mm-hmm.
They were sitting in the hallway trying to hear what was going on.
Oh, really?
Okay, that's how packed it was.
Yeah.
It was so different from the usual, how to teach math and this kind of thing.
Was this in Canada?
This was in Canada.
In Canada, okay.
So they were hungry for this, the teachers.
Yeah.
And they didn't know who I was. It wasn't like it's Tim Barnett. No one knew who I was,
Yeah.
My wife did. That was it. And then, so what happened was, as soon as I left, they had comment cards. People filled them out. And the guy who invited me, he said, Tim, I want you back, and I want you to do 6 sessions. I didn't even have 6 talks at that point. You know what I'm saying? But I said, absolutely.
Have to do some homework.
I got a year. Yeah, I got a year. And so I came back the next year, and I didn't even realize. I see Sean McDowell. Is this a dream? What's happening here? He's at the front. There's a few hundred people max.
Yeah.
But he, does these kind of things. I walk right up to him, very nervous, doesn't know who I am, and I said, Sean, I want to do what you do, and I would love it if you came to one of my sessions. And it just worked out he could come to one because his schedule was busy too.
Yeah.
And he sat in the back of the room, and I spoke on what why our young people are leaving the church and what we can do to stop them.
Yeah.
And I did a little role play, an atheist role play, which I got from him.
Nice.
Very
good.
I saw him online doing these role plays.
It's hard to pull that off. It's not as easy as you might think.
It's not. You got to know your stuff, and
Yeah.
I don't want an atheist to see me do the role play and say,
that's the most ham-fisted argument I've ever seen.
So here's the thing, and this is flash forward to today. There's an atheist on YouTube, and he's got quite a bit of a following. Okay, and he's got a YouTube channel called Pine Creek, and his name is Doug. And now Doug actually critiqued my video. I have a video online where I do the role play.
Okay.
And he's gonna critique it. What I do is I do the role play for 20 minutes, then I do open it up Q&A, and I'm still the atheist, got the atheist glasses on.
Yeah.
And so it's more interactive, and then I answer the challenges. He responded to the answers to the challenges. He starts his video though by saying, and I actually cut this clip and I put it in my talk to prove, here's an atheist, and he says, Tim does an excellent job at role-playing an atheist. So I got high marks from a guy who traffics in this thing, so that's pretty good. And he recommended that people check out my arguments, which is kind of neat. So anyways, I do the role play. Sean had to run to his next session, so we didn't get to talk, but he said, Tim, let's go out for dinner. So we went out for dinner, sat right next to him for 3 hours or so. We were eating, chatting, talking.
Yeah.
And he said, I want to help you. He flies to California or wherever he was going, back home. And then I go home, and a few weeks or months later, I get a text message from Brett Kunkel.
Oh,
so Brett,
okay.
the president of Maven, started this. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
And it says, hey, this is Brett Kunkel, Student Impact Director at Stand to Reason. I was talking with Sean McDowell, and can I get your email? Now, it was April Fool's Day when I got that text.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure, this is a joke.
Okay.
Brett Kunkel, he doesn't have my number. How is that possible, right?
Yeah.
And sure enough, I reached out. I actually looked up the number to see if it was from California. I thought it was my brother, playing a game with me. But it was him, and he invited me to rethink. That was what he wanted to. Okay. He said, I watched some of your videos online. Sean says you're good at this. Let's get you out here. So they flew me out. This is the first big event I'd ever done. 1,100 students.
Yeah.
I was getting paid. That's the other thing. When I was starting out, I was taking any event I could do, and if I didn't get paid, so be it.
Sure.
That's just the way it goes. And so they flew me out. They paid me. Had a lot of fun, and when I finished, Brett was like, "You're coming back next year," and then a few months later, they called me and said, "You want to come work for us?" So it was that's how that I didn't realize it, but that talk, Greg Kokel sat in the front row, his daughter right next to him.
Yeah. Now, which talk was it?
It was actually the same talk I gave today.
You gave today? Okay.
So that Rethink event was actually very similar to what we just did here this weekend.
Yeah.
The structure was very similar. I think Brett opened with "Why I'm a Christian," and I think I was right after him with kind of the argument for God from the design of the universe.
Okay.
The fine tuning. I don't know if Scott was there or not, but it turned out that was a job interview for me, and
nice.
You just never know. And I didn't. I thought at that point it was like, if I died tonight, I've accomplished all I want to accomplish.
Yeah. There's a little bit of serendipity in there, but you can't deny the fact that there was a lot of hard work on your part.
Oh, sure.
You were committed to this venture, and you kind of stuck with it. So hard work pays off.
That's right. Greg Kokel has a slogan, a mantra. He says, "Bloom where you're planted."
Yeah.
And I'd been listening to Greg on the radio show, way before any of this stuff, and I took that to heart. It's like, okay, how am I going to do this right here in Toronto? I'm not going to see my name in lights and all that stuff. I just want to have an impact in my community. Okay, so the church is within 100 miles.
Yeah.
Let's look them up. And it's like, hey, I'm sending emails, I'm attaching videos, I'm doing all that stuff. And hardly anyone got back to me.
Yeah.
One guy got back to me, and it turned out that was just a challenge. That was just to challenge me.
Those I know how that can be very, very depressing and very discouraging. It's one of those things, though, like if you're in sales, you're going to have to get past that. You're going to get told no a lot more than you're told yes.
Sure.
And you just have to press on through, because the opportunities that you do gain whenever you do press on through are well worth it, right?
Oh, big time.
So that's great.
Yeah.
So you're still with Stand to Reason.
How
many you got kids?
I have 3 little girls.
3 little girls.
7, 5, and 2. And so, I mean, they're the best. It's funny, I think as a man, when we found out the first one, you're thinking, I want a boy, and you find it's a girl. It's like there's a little disappointment, but of course, once you have that girl,
melts your heart.
It you know what? I don't know, what I would be like if I had 3 boys or even one. These girls have changed me. And I think a lot of people in the who gravitate towards apologetics, we're more logical. We're not as emotive. We're
true.
There's a certain,
and maybe to our own fault.
Yeah, no, I think there is this part that we need to be softer. I think if we want to be even more persuasive.
Yeah.
Not just have our arguments persuade, but our character is persuasive. And I know for a fact that, and my wife can testify to this, that these girls, the man I was when I married my wife, and no kids, and then the man I am today is totally different.
There's a culling process, that's for sure.
And 3 girls will do that to you.
Yeah.
So I'm playing with dolls, and
God bless you
as hair.
Those girls grow older, man.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll be praying for you.
Seriously, I'll need it. I'll need it.
All right. Well, this is our longest interview, I think, so far.
We're just having fun. We're just getting started.
We are. Yeah, we are having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, so many times in these interviews, it's, whenever the thing gets over, that's about the time whenever you're getting in, you're really starting to love it. I do like the long format interviews that are so popular right now on podcasts and stuff like that. But, do you get to use these arguments a lot, especially like I'm a big fan of the cosmological or the Kalam cosmological argument.
Yeah,
it's very easy to remember.
You got it.
It has a lot of implications for the nature of God.
Yeah,
if you're willing to kind of tease those out, which is not hard.
No.
But the amount of times I've actually been able to use the cosmological argument, it's usually a cultural argument against why I shouldn't become a Christian. So, oh, you're a Christian.
Yeah.
And we get to the point where, there's a little bit of dialogue between me and someone else. And then it ends up, being something like, well, hell's a big deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I call them gospicles.
Yeah.
Because they're obstacles of the gospel, right?
Yeah.
And hell is, you go to a university campus.
Hell, sexuality in some way, form, or fashion, whether it's homosexuality or just
transgender issue,
or even just while I'm living with my girlfriend,
Sure.
I love her.
Yeah.
So it's those kind of issues too.
Yeah.
And those are typically where the stalemate gets. It's like that's what you have to kind of work through with people a lot of times, which a lot of that is just understanding and knowing what the Bible says and kind of digging into that. But how often do you use these arguments?
I get to use them in training Christians.
Sure.
That's probably the biggest, the most frequent, even just last Wednesday. What's today? Saturday. So on Wednesday, I was at a church and I taught on the cosmological argument. I taught on God's existence. So I kind of walked through William Lane Craig's design argument and cosmological argument.
Yeah.
And but I find that I get to use them probably more than most people, just because of the nature of this job. I'll go to an event and there are people who will show up and this is great. This is what we want. Who don't share my convictions.
Yeah.
And so within the last month, I probably used one form of an argument for God with an atheist. Just last weekend I was in California. I was in El Centro, right near the Mexican-California border.
Yeah.
And I spoke on pro-life. Scott's doing that today, and gave some of those arguments. And there was
why do you hate women?
Yeah. And then there was a and there's a woman that came up, an older woman that came over, had a question for me, and she prefaced by saying, "Look, I'm Catholic. I believe in God. I'm Catholic, and I'm pro-choice." Those are the first things she said to me. And but then she said, I'd never thought about those arguments that you gave. Thought you did a really good job in presenting them. Gave me something to think about. And so here's an opportunity where we got into a little discussion. Someone who doesn't share my convictions, and these are really good. These are helpful. These are what we should be doing as believers.
Yeah.
Not just keeping content to ourselves, and but finding opportunities is the hard part, because we tend to hang around people who all share the same beliefs as we do.
Yeah, it's hard to not. It's not just the Christian's problem. It's everyone's problem. It's hard to not kind of get into an echo chamber.
Yeah.
It's just part and parcel to the human nature and the human endeavor. You find like-minded people, and you stick with those same birds. Yeah. And it's even easier, I think, now with social media and other things. Big time. I mean, it's almost damaging.
Your group on Facebook, and that's right. And so I think we need to be intentional about getting outside of those boxes. It's uncomfortable, but maybe it means starting up a little, group. One of the things I've been doing to kind of stretch myself, the end of last year, and of course moving into this year, is I started a book club with, right now it's just all Christians. It's apologists. Yeah. And some of them you would know. And what we're doing is we're reading books that we don't want to read. Oh. And so we've been going through some,
I really hate that.
Yeah, no, and because I
don't want to read Bart Ehrman's misquoting Jesus or whatever it was, but I probably need to.
Well, that's the thing. We need, if we want to represent their view appropriately and be able to respond to it, and certainly I think guys who follow Bart, they're reading his stuff. So if we want to address those arguments, it's good to consult guys like Dan Wallace, who's responded to it, and some of these other guys.
We had him last year, and I loved Dan.
And he's amazing.
Good guy.
But for ourselves, let's read these guys. Mm-hmm. So I've been trying to do that, and with these friends, and it pushes us to do it. I do it on my own anyways because it's part of my job, but this really pushes me to go deep, get my pen out, scribbling on paper. Okay, because we're gonna have a big Skype. What we do is we Skype together every Monday, and usually ends up being like a 3-hour thing, and we're just trying to get through a couple of chapters.
Yeah.
But we're able to dissect and think through and think critically, and it kind of gets us out of the echo chamber. Even though we all share the same view, it's like, okay, but we're dialoguing with the view here. And I think that's the next best thing to dialoguing with Bart Ehrman, or someone who shares his view.
Yeah.
We're taking on the real McCoy. And then when we do meet that guy who holds his view, we're ready for it, and we're able to say something, speak some truth in that situation. We're not caught off guard.
Yeah.
So I found that I've grown theologically, apologetically, spiritually through those kind of interactions.
There's this idea that kind of has since I have become a Christian, or at least returned back to the Lord from college, and had been challenged in my liberal arts environment. I have seen this play out over and over and over again in a positive way. Is that we should not be scared of questions.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if this is true, we should be able to pursue any rabbit trail.
Yeah.
Maybe rabbit trail is not the right way to phrase that.
Some of them are,
but yeah, sometimes but you just there's so much fun.
Sure. But pull on any thread,
Yeah, see how far it unravels.
That's right.
And there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to engage in those kind of conversations and that kind of dialogue.
Yeah.
God's got this. God's got you.
I'm with you. Nothing to fear.
There's nothing to fear. So yeah, that's good stuff, and it's probably gonna help make you a better person too.
Definitely. I certainly, and I'm open to changing my view on certain issues. And so if I'm going to read this guy, and who knows, maybe that opens me up, or maybe it makes me more even staunch in my view, because it's like, oh, that was the best argument on the other. Okay,
After Elaine Pagel, she was one of the first people to Elaine.
Is she the feminist?
She translated the Gospel of Thomas.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And she came to Montevallo, and it perked my interest. This was I think that this was whenever I was in the mushy middle. I was reading Revelations and getting super convicted, but still smoking, or doing whatever.
Yeah.
I just gave myself away. But I remember hearing her talk about the Gospel of Thomas, and see, her arguments were that, this is a rejected gospel, but there's no reason to reject this gospel. And once I looked into it, it's like, well, this gospel was scholarly, all right, so juxtapose this against Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were written in the first century. We have copies over here.
Sure.
But everybody agrees, scholars agree, they were written in the first century. Well, Gospel of Thomas not only wasn't written in the first century, it was probably written in the 3rd century.
Yeah.
And you can see all of these things that are happening within the Gospel of Thomas that point to a different culture than the culture that Jesus lived in. And so whenever I start, and then you read the Gospel of Thomas, and it doesn't sound like the Jesus in the Gospel.
Sure.
And so it's like dealing with counterfeit money, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? That's the cheesy analogy that I've heard.
It's a great analogy.
You deal, you only deal with the authentic, and then whenever you come across counterfeit money, it just feels wrong.
Yeah.
And so whenever I read the Gospel of Thomas, there was a lot that, this is not right.
Yeah.
But then, our feelings can be wrong, so you dig into the more historical aspect of it, and the whole thing gets blown out. And so, those are the little. That's one of those little things that I just love about apologetics.
Yeah.
Just being able to be intellectually curious about these things. And
that's a good principle what you bring up. You gotta know, when you know the real deal, you're able to spot a counterfeit. And that goes with any, the more we pour over the scriptures and study the scriptures, I'm often just stunned when I find out what some, Christians are believing today. And it's like, seriously? You're buying into that? How could you buy into that when you, but clearly they don't, and Brett's alluded to this at the conference, and others have, that we aren't reading our Bibles. We aren't. And so if you don't know what you're going to be, any kind of wind of doctrine that blows through, you're going to just jump, grab hold of it.
It's true. I mean, that's so true. And, even, if you don't like the term Holy Bible, think about it as sacred scripture, or, even just come at it from a historical perspective. There's a lot of good history in the Bible.
Yeah.
I'm biased, obviously. I think that it's really is a completely trustworthy document. But even, you can approach it like that. It's just like, all right, so historically, what's the New Testament say about Jesus? And that's where a lot of scholarship starts. There's no reason to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
That's right.
Because the baby and the bathwater are both good.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, Tim, I don't want to hold you up any longer, and I think we might have other people that we want to interview. I'm not sure.
Sure.
But, man, I appreciate so much this conversation.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up sometime soon and do this again.
Will you be in Alabama?
I will be. I'm living
Rethink?
there. So,
okay. That'd be great to catch up.
So when are you going to be in Alabama next?
So I'll be in Alabama. Rethink Apologetic Student Conference is happening in Alabama. I think it's April 26, 27.
Okay. Do you know where the venue is this time? Is it still going to be at Briarwood?
It is still at Briarwood.
Okay.
I'm almost positive about that, but I think what they're going to start doing is moving it to another location and back every 2 years. So
I remember maybe it was going to move between Briarwood and Hunter Street.
Yeah, is that the other big one? Yeah. So I believe Briarwood still this year, and then they're going to take a break, and the other church is going to host. So we're excited about it. I mean, we had a great turnout last year. Yeah. And 1,800 students, something like that. I'm sure we'll break 2,000.
That was the second year that you've done it. This would be the third year that you guys have done this, right? Okay, good.
And it just keeps getting, every time I'm surprised, because I always think, man, it can't get better than this. But every year it gets better. And this year we're doing, the theme is Has God Spoken? And so we're looking like, how do we know this book is God's word? Not just reliable and trustworthy. We'll talk about that. Yeah. But how do we know it's God's word? Is there any indications of that this is a supernatural book? And
that's a good question.
Yeah. So we have a TED Talk. Myself, Alan Schleman, and Greg Kokel, each taking about 12 minutes each. And we bring together, we use our hands to show the marks of the supernatural, and each finger represents, I'm not going to give it away here, but people can come, and that'll be one of the opening sessions. And I mean, we've got a lineup of incredible speakers, like the all-stars in this kind of apologetic world.
Yeah, sure.
Speaking to students. And we have the same guy, the illusionist who was there last year. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you remember him, but he did a fantastic job. And this year he brought his A game again. And so we've already run through this conference in Orange County, the same theme. Yeah. And now we're going to do Dallas in March and Alabama in April. So you guys are going to get the best, I think the most polished of all the conferences, because we've now tried them out twice already. So if people are listening and they want to come check that out.
But it is a fun thing about hearing you guys speak. It's like I was like, I've heard Brett give this talk before. But it's funnier now than it was a couple of years back.
It's true. I don't know why. I mean, and that's a testimony to
really drawing out his dad.
That's right. Sure. And that, I wish I could do that. I wish my dad looked like Santa Claus, because that would be, hilarious. Yeah. Anyways.
All right. Well, Tim, thanks so much.
Yeah.
And we will see you in Alabama soon.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
That was good. Was that 48 minutes?
Apparently, that's the longest one
that we've
done so far.
Is that too long? Are you going to edit that? Or?
No, it's not too long.